And so a lot of companies fall into that dependence trap where they are absolute vassal states to these prime contractors. We scraped up all the money the company had. It was $1 million. And we put it all in the preparation of this bid. We picked SRA mainly for culture and fit by allowing me to have no earnout and no strings attached. I actually stayed there longer than if I'd had an earnout.
Again, and welcome back to the Nex-Chapter podcast, recorded here in the Republic studio, as you can see behind me. And think of it as the Republic for founders and entrepreneurs, where we share wisdom, have fun, and celebrate the journey of another post-exit entrepreneur. I'm Raman Sehgal, and I am the author of The Floundering Founder and also the Toronto chapter lead at Post-Exit Founders. And I'm also the host of today's show. And this show is for founders who are scaling and founders who have sold and are figuring out what the heck happens next. And honestly, that is what this episode today with Adam Rossi is all about. And all the episodes that we do typically focus on three areas: the trajectory of the business they scaled, the transaction itself, how they sold, and also then the transition, the reality of what happened next, which is a key topic of today's episode. Think of it as unfiltered wisdom from post-exit founders. All right, my guest today is Adam Rossi, and he is a tech entrepreneur who built a 250-person software company serving law enforcement and intelligence agencies. Think the FBI and all that kind of stuff, often outcompeting giants like Lockheed Martin and head-to-head bids. When a banker returned with 5 acquisition offers matching the absurd figure Adam and his wife had tossed around, Adam accepted an all-cash deal from SRA International, a publicly traded defense contractor. The sale created generational wealth for his family with no earnout or strings attached. Incredible. However, after the exit, Adam learned the hardest part of selling a company isn't the negotiation, it's deciding what comes next. And that's what he shares on today's podcast. He is a really, really great guy. And I had a lot to kind of resonate with his story today, very similar to myself in lots of ways. The big difference, I think, with Adam was just the way in which he exited his business in a kind of all cash deal, and no strings attached almost, but it's kind of the way about him that he stayed around for a while and then eventually left the business. And it's a real kind of story of success in terms of how he built this business and how he sold it. But interestingly enough, the real challenge for Adam seemed to come after the exit, which is something we hear about a lot on the podcast. So I'm sure you're going to enjoy today's show. And wherever you're watching or listening, please leave us a kind rating, subscribe if you want to hear more episodes, and please give us some feedback if you like what we're doing here. Please enjoy today's show. Hey Adam, welcome to Nex-Chapter podcast. Great to have you here.
Thanks, Raman. Great to be here.
Good to be here. You and I were just chatting about how cold the world in North America is right now. So hopefully you're nice and warm wherever you are.
Coldest since 1989 here in Northern Virginia.
Oh my God. I thought we'd got rid of all the snow, and then as I went upstairs to grab my tea, looked out the window and it's like throwing down here in Toronto. Well, look, we always start our episodes, Adam, with a bit of a ritual around like having a drink together. So what drink or drinks have you brought to the show today?
All right. Well, I have my shot of espresso here. I drink
Nice.
3 shots every morning, no matter where I am in the world. I think it's healthy, so that's what I brought with me.
Do you drink any more later in the day, or do you just do the triple shot in the morning?
If I've got a rough day, I'll have some at lunch as well. But if I'm drinking it past then, it can be dangerous.
Very cool. I should send you this. A friend of mine is really into coffee. He had actually a very successful cannabis business that he sold a few years ago. And he sent me this podcast talking about how different types of coffee impact your health. And since then, I've switched from espresso-based drinks to like a pour-over technique. And it is, I have to say, it's amazing. So I'm going to send you that afterwards. I think if you're into coffee, you'll like it. Well, I've gone for the most Canadian thing ever, and I am drinking a Tim Hortons tea. So there you go. Who thought that someone from the UK would be drinking an apple and cinnamon tea from Tim Hortons? But here we are. Well, look, so good to have you here. I'm genuinely so excited to do this because I have heard you interviewed elsewhere, and I've read up about you, and it's amazing what you've achieved in your kind of entrepreneurial career. So maybe just to start off with, Adam, give us a bit of the kind of, in a nutshell, the business that you built, maybe a little bit of the origin story as well, just to kind of give us an overview up to the point where you transacted, and then I'll maybe ask some more questions about kind of how you did it.
Okay, yeah. So I think I was born in the luckiest time in modern history, in that, I grew up without computers. The PC was not available to regular people. But I was lucky enough that my father, for his construction company, bought a personal computer. So the IBM PC, right? The first. And I was lucky enough to get access to that computer. And eventually we got a 300 baud modem. And I was lucky enough to be able to dial into bulletin boards and start to program. And so, I kind of spent my early teens as an early computer user and went to college and pursued engineering, but really, and went to a college, Virginia Tech, that was the first in the country at the time to require engineering students to have their own computer. It actually made like nightly news. It was so unusual, right? So right at that moment in time, and I thought, rather than be a professional engineer, I want to start a software company and write software programs for structural engineers. And I did that. I mean, I founded a company and I wrote a program to design retaining walls, steel, concrete reinforced retaining walls. And it started to get popular. And I thought, this is what I'll do, right? I'll write software programs for engineers. Of course, life never turns out the way you plan. And so the company that I eventually sold in 2010 became known for code breaking, evidence collection, image analysis, some really special tools, mainly for intelligence, law enforcement, defense. So obviously something happened there. It was, it's one of these things where we did a single project for a federal law enforcement agency. I was a single solo kind of developer. It was just you
at the time. Yeah. I thought I was going to ask it.
And 9/11 happened, and that just took off, and it became kind of all hands on deck. And you did good work for us. We need you to come downtown and work in the skiff, and the business just changed in a moment. And and I really focused on that going forward.
So, I mean, that was a black swan moment for many of us in life, right? In terms of wherever we were in the world. But for you and your organization, I've got, for example, friends that have had defense businesses that went through crazy growth during that time. So if I've understood correctly, that, and Ellie said, luck is clearly not the right word in that context, but something happens in life and was that kind of the catalyst for real significant growth when that happened? Was it just a bit of an avalanche for 10 years after that? Or you could talk to us about what else. Were you still a bit of a solo entrepreneur at that time as well?
So my wife and I had similar kind of financial backgrounds, and that we had negative net worths. We got married coming out of grad school. We met the first day of grad school. So we come out, we get married. I say, hey, you just need to know I'm going to start a software company when we've saved up a little bit of money. And my wife's like, great. We don't have any, we have a negative $70,000 net worth. So we got a little work ahead of us. So we lived very, very modestly for 2 years. We saved money, and I started the software company just in our crummy, apartment, kitchen table. And so I was chronically undercapitalized, and I was very, very, very cautious about hiring other employees. So when I needed more output, I would just work instead of 20 hours, I'd work 22 hours that day, right? I mean, I was cranking out software as a single developer. And it was like that for the first few years until I finally felt secure enough to hire an employee, right? And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
so the growth of my company, it was very cautious, very cash constrained. We kind of hit 10 people, and I had to make a major change at that point due to my kind of being a control freak. And then we quickly went to 50 and then 250, right? It's the classic kind of, as barriers are removed, we grew. But yeah, for that first kind of inception point, I didn't know how to market my company.
Mhm.
And this is very, very, so 1999, this is early internet.
Yeah.
You have
Yeah.
a website, but, there wasn't like Google ads you take out, right? None of that existed. So I started writing articles for programmer magazines to get the word out. And I would speak at conferences. And I was, writing a book with another guy. And I just wanted to be known as, hey, this is an expert. And that's the reason I had a first kind of job with a federal agency is they saw me speak at a conference, and they came up afterwards and were like, hey, we've got a major problem with something. Could you come take a look at it? You're not far out of DC. Come down to, this is the FBI, so the J. Edgar Hoover building. We'll show you what we're doing. And what I saw was like a project, a software project that was a total disaster, right? It was like it was going, towards a deadline. They were never going to make it. The architecture was wrong. And I said, look, I can rewrite all this. It'll take me night and day, but we can just meet the deadline if I start now and just kind of don't eat or sleep for a while. And so I did all that, and I handed the software over, and I thought to myself, okay, this was totally dysfunctional. I'm a private sector guy. I was focused on structural engineers, like I don't like these arbitrary deadlines, and I separated, right? I was like, here's the software, good luck. And when 9/11 happened, it was kind of like, okay, we need to do a bunch of stuff really fast. Who's that guy that did this? This was a real success. And they said, you gotta, and quite frankly, when that happened, I was so fired up. I was ready to enlist. I was just like, we need to do something, right? So when they said, come back, I was like, I'm it,
Yeah. Yeah. So there was an emotional attachment there as well, based on what was going on. But I wanted to underline something, the value of just pitching yourself as an expert through speaking. And, I'm a big believer in that if you can pitch yourself as an expert, assuming there's a market out there, they will come and find you. They will seek you out as being the expert, which is what happened. And my assumption is in that industry, Adam, is word of mouth must be very powerful, right? You obviously talked about, you almost didn't know much about marketing. I'm a marketing guy from back in training. What a classic kind of thought leadership things by pitching yourself like that. And then if you deliver a good job in a niche, that's when it can catch fire. So were you then starting to get calls from different law enforcement, or was it growth within, for example, the FBI? Like, hey, you need to speak to Department A or B or whatever. Like, talk to us about how it then, because you quickly said that you went from 50 to 250. So I'm interested in knowing, like, how did the business catch fire during that process?
It was really because we were working in such a unique niche. The word would get out amongst people that kind of work together, agencies, or there's all these joint task forces, and different agencies are doing stuff, and they say, hey, where did you get that? That's, hey, the bad guys are writing messages, they're using some encryption, you guys broke, like, how'd you do that, right? Where'd you get that? Oh, we'll talk to them. And so, we would get calls. I would get calls on my office phone from like a fake business, right? It just looked like, and it would be a federal agency, and they would speak kind of in a careful way, like, we'd like you to come down for a meeting at this like company that sounds weird, right? And you go there, and it's like, oh, this is actually this agency, right? That didn't want to
say their name on the phone.
Yeah, kind of advertise themselves. So.
Wow. Okay. That's cool. This is such a random question, but I have to ask, like, during this, obviously you became a real expert in this field. Did you feel that, was there ever any risk to you? Did you ever feel any risk that you were on the side of the good guys, right? Like, was there any risk that the bad guys might find out who you were? And, well, I know that's a really odd question, but you seem like a family man. You mentioned your wife, all that kind of stuff. Presumably there was some point where that could have come up as a kind of a fear.
It did happen, and I don't want to go into the details too much, but what I would say is, there were two sides of what we did. So a lot of it was international. It wouldn't really show up in like a courtroom where you'd go to testify. But we would also do things where our tools were used to go after organized crime groups domestically.
Wow, okay.
And when you do that, their defense is saying, well, how do we know that tool came up with the right decryption, for example? I mean, so I would go in and testify as an expert witness, and those people would know that and threaten, if you go in, like, we're going to come to your house, right? And so I just made the decision early on, you can't hide from the world. If people want to find you, they'll find you. I'm really focused personally on physical fitness, combat training in jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, boxing.
You can look after yourself.
Well, I think every man needs to, and every man with a family needs to think about that. And so I went out and bought the finest trained police dog, money can buy, a Dutch Shepherd, home secure, right? I mean, you do all those things, but at the end of the day, you can't live your life in fear, and people will always threaten you somehow and try to intimidate you, and you just have to go on.
Wow. Well, thanks for answering that, by the way, because I appreciate that you didn't probably want to go into too much depth. And so, okay, let's get back to the business journey then. So you have, I suppose, established your expertise. You have started to build a real niche, and you're getting kind of word of mouth and a growth. And so how did it go from you to 10 to 20, to, I think 50 to 250? And I think that was over a 10-year period. If I'm kind of like, right, that's a significant amount of growth. Was it just the tailwind of the sector and the growth? I'm sure it wasn't just that, but that
it was it was me kind of removing myself as a bottleneck. If you looked at our growth, it was the classic exponential where for the first 4 or 5 years, it's like flatlined, right? And then it kind of went like this. And the reason was, it's the classic E-Myth. I'm a big fan of the E-Myth book because I lived it.
Yeah.
And when and I was just talking to a sports coach, and it's like this. Like, if Michael Jordan, great basketball player, if he's trying to coach someone in basketball, eventually he's going to say, like, just do it the way I do it. And they're like, but you're Michael Jordan, right? It's not an effective way to coach. I was like that with software, right? Where I brought people in, we sat around a single table. I would walk around and look at everyone's screen, and I would say, that's not right. Hold on, like, hop up. Let me show you how it's, and I would micromanage them, or they would think they did a good job. They check their code into the version control system. They go home. I would rewrite it that night, check it back in. They'd come in the morning totally demoralized, right? Like, hey, what happened?
You read pen my work effectively.
Yeah. Well, I just, I was thinking about it, and I decided, we should do it this way. So at that like 10 or 11 or 12 person mark, I started to think, what's wrong? Why are we not growing? Why can't we get any more bandwidth in this company? And the reason was because I can't look at any more screens, right? Like, the table was only so big. I can't. Yeah. And if I can't do that, I can't write software for this company anymore. So I came in and I said, I'm not writing any more code. And everyone just was like, this is what? Like, well, what are you going to do? And I said, I need to be at customers, talking to customers all day long. I need to be out of your hair. I need to let you all do what I hired you to do. And that was every company has, it's never like this. Sure. It's like a big stair step. That was a big stair step, right? Yeah. As soon as I did that, it worked better for two reasons. One is, I think the founder is the best salesperson for any business.
I agree. I absolutely agree. Yeah.
And so the fact that I was just not holed up in the office with intermittent, customer, but instead was at customer sites all day long, was a huge sales and marketing change. Yeah. And the other thing is, just not being a single point of failure in the process of software development allowed them to be much more productive.
Yeah. It really resonates with me, this story. Just a few things. One, I was very similar to you. I remember being so cautious about, recruiting that first person. And then once you recruit one, you're like, okay, maybe one more. And then for me, I took small investment years before we sold, and my mentor who invested, Fiona, I remember did this exercise with me where she kind of made me write a list of everything that I was doing in the business: finance, HR, client management, business development. She's like, what are you world class at that list? Like, where is it? Like, kind of classic 80-20. And I ended up with 2 or 3 things. And one was business development, right? And being out. And I ended up moving to the US following that. And it's unbelievably similar to your story in that regard. And it takes a lot of humility and kind of like soul searching to remove yourself, right? Because you're effectively, you think you're better than everyone at everything.
Yeah, I did.
And what seemed to happen with you, if I've understood, is once you were able to focus on where you are particularly fantastic in terms of speaking to customers, it really caught fire. And then you scaled to, I think, 250 people before you will go into the transaction in the minutes, which and were they all office based, or were they all over the world? Were they all US based? What was the setup?
It was 250 people with very, very unique software development skills, as well as really deep skills in things like algorithm development.
Okay.
So these were special folks. They all were security cleared. Most of them worked in kind of one of 3 offices. We had, an office in Northern Virginia. We had an office in Maryland. We had an office in West Virginia. And then we did have folks that would deploy out to Afghanistan, Iraq. These were folks who would take the software and be kind of forward deployed engineers and help integrate it into data feeds and things like that. So yeah, we did have folks all over the world, but primarily kind of in the DC metro area.
Interesting. And before going to the kind of the transaction piece, was there any, like, hearing your story, Adam, is like, it strikes me as you guys were very good at sticking to your niche and becoming very well known and growing in kind of that classic flywheel piece of that. Was there ever a temptation to move into other sectors? Like, so I'm thinking, whether it be pharmaceutical or whether it be even like, the kind of aviation sector, where there are like highly regulated, confidential, high security risk. Was there ever a temptation to do what you do in other sectors, or, we were very, very focused on, hey, this is where we play?
I was just personally attracted to what I call mission critical elements of what people were doing in national security. And so what I mean by that was there was a time sensitive objective, this is what people are doing. We need to have a counter to that. We need to come up with, and so I just loved that challenge. And I felt like we're still a tiny company compared to like a Lockheed Martin or, these giants that we're competing against. And so I just never felt like, oh, well, we've saturated our niche here. I mean, it was like we were tiny, right? We were the best, but we were small. And so I never wanted to get into something where I didn't feel that sense of urgency, mission, adventure. And it's one of the reasons why I wanted to sell at some point was I felt like some of what we were doing had dragged on for so long. And I noticed a lot of the people that participated in it had lost the mission fire and were just kind of like, why are we doing this? It's like, well, because we've been doing it for 10 years. It's like, yeah, that doesn't feel like what I signed up for. And I started to lose the passion,
Okay, I'll follow that thread. Before I do, you mentioned obviously larger competitors. Were these guys just annoyed by you guys? Were you guys, they're trying to swat you guys away? Like, did you become a real kind of like fly in the ointment for these guys who, presumably had locked up contracts for years with law enforcement and national security?
Yes. And here's the dastardly thing that these big players do. They work on intimidation, and they are very much monopolists in what they feel they control. And so what they try to do is lure you into being a subcontractor to them, which is the easiest path when you're starting, because it's kind of like, look, I'm not credible enough to go in front of a customer and be a prime contractor. So if I subcontract to Raytheon, Northrop, Lockheed, whoever, they've won the prime contract. I can lend my expertise as a niche player. But once you do that, they start to say, well, hey, 30% of your business comes from subcontracts from us, so you better do what we tell you to do. Don't you dare compete against us on something or you're cut off. And so a lot of companies fall into that dependence trap where they are absolute vassal states to these prime contractors. I never did that. My thing was, if it's my mission, my reputation, I'm the prime contractor. I don't. And so Lockheed did this specifically. And by the way, Lockheed's a great company, but this is what all primes do. I'm not singling out Lockheed. What they did to us is they said, look, if you don't compete on something, we'll make you a premier kind of partner on this thing. They were worried about us being a competitor. And I said, okay, that was kind of too large for me to take on individually. I teamed with them. We won it. I remember they called me and they said, hey, before the Wall Street hears this, we're just giving you a heads up that we won this and it's going to be great for all of us. And I was great, And then a year goes by and it's like, hey, you guys are doing, when do I step into this? Oh yeah. You're in phase 2, Adam. Don't worry. And then, like 3 years go by and you say, I got tricked. I got taken off the street and they never intended on ever having me participate in this. And so I said, okay, there's a contract coming up that Lockheed has been the incumbent on for 10 years. And they're doing a terrible job. I know they're not serving this customer the way this customer deserves to be treated. I know I can do better. When I said I was going to compete against Lockheed, there were only 2 bids, me and Lockheed. I went to Raytheon. I shouldn't have all. I went to most of the other primes who were too scared to compete against Lockheed. And I said, do you want to be a teammate of mine? I'm going to compete against them. And one of them said, I wouldn't waste 5 cents supporting your bid against Lockheed. Okay. We scraped up all the money the company had. It was $1 million. And we put it all in the preparation of this bid. Super complex. I mean, if you saw, this would be like 12 bankers' boxes of printed documents, the technical, the financial, it's just major architecture. Anyways, spent $1 million just in additional staff to help write it, proofread it, right? I mean, all the graphics, it was a major production. When we won that, it was like a shot rang out, right? All the primes kind of called us and were like, hey, can we be on your team? The guy that said I wouldn't waste 5 cents actually had the gall to call back and say, hey, buddy, good work on that one. What was funny is Lockheed said, you'll never get a penny of subcontracting revenue from us again. And I said, well, you know what? Nothing from nothing is nothing.
You never did in the first place. Yeah. Wow. I'm glad I asked that question because I think it's a great learning for entrepreneurs scaling businesses of not being tempted into a new revenue stream and route to market that can actually do more harm than good. I've always been never chase the money, right? Like to an extent, because it can be bad money, right? And in that example there, I think it's a fantastic one of the risk of becoming a subcontractor and the risk of then not getting zero out of these guys. Okay, amazing. Thank you for sharing that story. Great story and so many learnings. So you mentioned before about losing your passion, and that kind of takes us into the kind of transaction piece. So was it a kind of a stars aligning moment that took the business to market? The market was good, the business was doing well, and you personally were maybe team members as well were losing that passion. Did something happen that kind of, or was it a very intentional, hey, I'm going to go shop the business situation?
It was very reluctant on my part. It was one of these things where, I was 39 years old. My wife and I had, 3 young kids, very like little tiny kids,
yeah.
Babies. And I just felt like if you think about kind of the global war on terror, for example, clearly there was a point where a lot of us said, this just isn't working. Like, what are we doing in Afghanistan? Right. I mean, it's not, nothing's changing. Right. And so a lot of the participants, the frontline people, the people that are the brave people that are, deployed out there, I could tell they were losing their, passion for what the mission was. And it felt that way to me too. That just felt like we're just doing things for routine. And so I kind of reluctant. And by the way, we would get offers from strategic primes kind of casual offers all the time, right? Hey, if you want to sell, we'd be happy to talk to you. So I talked to an investment banker, and my wife and I were just like, look, we don't know if we want to sell. We don't know what the market would value us at. And so we're going to be honest with you. We're probably going to just walk away, right? We don't want to get your hopes up. We don't want to, go through a process. And the investment banker said, okay, if we can get, is there a number at which point you'd say, well, I have to take that? And I said, yeah, the number is kind of this. Because I don't think that's, there's no way.
Possible. Okay.
Like
so you just pitched a,
yeah, like just pick a high number. And I think it was part of that was just kind of like, I love my business. I love my employees. I love my customers. I still, even though I'm losing some of the fire, the passion, I couldn't really imagine not owning the company. And so they went out and talked to a few of the strategics, and they came back and they're like, oh, we got that number. Like, we got that.
Wow.
So it's a yes, right? And even then I was kind of like, oh, okay. I didn't expect this, And so we ended up running a process, right? You put a book together, the investment bankers put it in front of these folks, and it just, and that's the other thing too. I think part of the reason we were so successful in negotiating is I would do these management briefings, and they could tell like I was halfway out the door, right? I was not one of these desperate sellers. It's like, please make an offer. It was almost the opposite. Like, don't make an offer, We're doing great. We don't really want to do this. We're talking, but
so almost like your reluctance and ability, but also this sense of you could walk away at any deal made it probably just drove the price up, my guess.
It did. And I was also very adamant about, I don't know what it would be like to work for a large company. I don't want an earnout. I don't want a 2-year thing where I have to be here. I don't want contingent money on your performance because I don't know how you're going to perform.
Of course, yeah.
So we set all these really, very kind of unusual terms. For my industry, that would be very unusual for the founder not to have an earnout.
Of course, yeah.
And we had a publicly traded company, SRA, that said, done on all terms. And we said, okay.
Okay, so I wanted to check one thing. Was your revenue all services, or was it kind of, because you were building software, but I'm guessing you were selling time as opposed to you were building SaaS or anything like that underneath?
Yeah, we did have licensing revenue. So
okay.
We had some things that were licensed to multiple agencies. And then a lot of it was different contract vehicles that were either fixed price, time and materials. So some of it was time-based as well. It was kind of a mix.
A mix of revenue. And what made, I think I could probably guess from this, but what made the business so valuable? And I'm not going to ask you, I can't remember if the number is public, and I'm not going to ask you what the number was, but obviously you had multiple bidders around the table, a buyer that was willing to say yes to no earnout and all that kind of stuff, with cash up front, which is amazing, right? It's very rare to achieve that. What was it about the business that made it such a valuable asset, right? Obviously you were growing, you had good revenue. Were there really sticky clients? Was it very profitable? Was it recurring revenue? I'm sure it's all of this. Was it just that kind of, not unicorn in the kind of tech sense, but like a unicorn in the sense that you just ticked all the boxes of a great business?
It pretty much was the fact that for our size, we had prime contracts with some of the hardest agencies in the United States
to get into,
get into, right? Just impossible, right? It's one of these things where I kind of liken it to, agencies in kind of the intel world. You can walk up and knock on the door and they'll never open it. No matter what you do, they'll just never open the door. But if you're the right skill set, you could be walking by and they open the door and pull you in, right?
Right. Okay.
And so,
interesting.
So if you were to say, hey, let's start a company and target, these agencies as customers, like, well, it's not so easy, right? Even with a lot of money. And so they viewed that as a way to get a reputation and a foothold and prime contract vehicles that were, some of them, single contracts to my company. Some of them, there'd be kind of a contract vehicle with maybe like 4 contract holders that would compete, but it would be like my little company and 3 giants, right? And so you'd have these other giants who are like, we lost that one, but they have a 5-year contract. Like, okay, like we want them,
Yeah.
we want that. And so it was that. It was our people were just absolutely known in the industry as the best of the best.
How did you attract to these people? Right? I'm sure people are listening being like, you were up, many of us are working against bigger competitors, but why did people come to work for you, Adam? Was it the niche? Was it the like culture? Was it you? I'm interested again, because it's very relevant for our audience.
I think we were doing some of the coolest stuff you could ever work on as a software engineer. And we were a culture of absolute A player star performers. And so if you go to work for a large organization, Google, whoever, there's going to be some of those. There's going to be some B players. There's going to be some, C+ players.
Sure.
If you, think about it, it'd be like, being on the NBA All-Star team, right?
Yeah,
and so people would say, for example, our selection process, you hear a lot of people talk about like, wow, it's really hard to get a job at Google. They have all these hard interview questions. Our selection process was way more difficult than those companies. And so almost everyone would drop out, right? It was a filter, and only, there'd be people who would be like, I can't believe I'm still doing this, but damn it, like I want to see what's on the other side here. Like, I've never had I've worked for all these big ones. I've never had a situation like this where I have to do homework, then come back in and present it. And, like that, it's just, you guys are crazy.
Yeah.
And so people wanted to work in an environment like that. And I'll give you an example. This was a source of frustration. After the acquisition, the HR organization of the acquirer said, hey, those things you do, like we would do logic puzzles and things like that. They'd say, you can't do that anymore. We'd say, why? And they said, well, it could be viewed as discriminatory. I was like, it's discriminatory against dumb people only. Like, and they'd be like, yeah, but we want you, can't you just knock it off, right? And I said, hold on. You bought us because we're the best of the best. We need to do this to know we're only letting in the best. We don't let in a B player. And so that's what large organizations are up against, is they just can't be as selective as we
can't be as selective. Yeah. It reminds me, the way you describe it, is like, the college application, like you guys are the Harvard or Stanford or whatever of it, like, getting into them is a heck of a process. But once you're in, you've got to up your game and be there and be the best, which is amazing. So, okay. So, and before I move on to kind of the transition post acquisition, SRA, were they a competitor or a larger player, or were they just trying to buy into the niche that you guys had?
So SRA was really interesting for a number of reasons. They were a $2 billion market cap, publicly traded defense contractor. They did a lot of, they did interesting things. They were involved in a lot of kind of civilian federal IT work. They also own things like a radar manufacturer. They're involved in a lot of different things. I loved the founder of SRA, Ernst Bolgeno, amazing man. And I just felt like SRA is a large company. They're publicly traded, but in the world of publicly traded, they're small, right? They're much smaller than anyone else we talk to. And I felt like I know the management on down. My people will feel comfortable here. And so, we picked SRA mainly for culture and fit. And I just really liked the people. What happened afterwards is a story in and of itself, because SRA very quickly was bought by private equity, taken private, combined with CSC and a number of other, it's now General Dynamics. So,
right. Okay.
So I'm talking about what I knew at the time, which was SRA was this kind of sleepy little defense contractor that was known as high moral values and didn't really, it felt very stable. It turned out to not be afterwards. But
yeah, it's interesting. I did an interview this week, and the guy that I interviewed talked about, they sold to a company at a at a moment in time where they felt they were a great culture fit, they could make a huge, quite similar, actually, quite a sleepy, publicly listed company. They would modernize the way they did things, take them to a new level, etc. But what they didn't see was actually that business would continue to acquire, and then that business ended up getting acquired by a larger company. Very similar story. And he said, I could only make, we could only make that decision based on the information that we had at the time. Similar to you, right? Like, we think it's the right fit. They met your offers, and you kind of have to let that go because it's kind of outside of your control at that point. But it must have been difficult for you to see that play out, and maybe we'll come on to that because I wanted to talk about. So tell us, obviously, it sounds like obviously your wife and kids and very close family, and so what happens the day after transaction then, Adam, right? You say, right, no earn out, cash out, I kind of want to walk away. What was the day after like, or did you have to stick around for a while as well?
Well, here's the thing. I think SRA was smart in that by allowing me to have no earn out and no strings attached, I actually stayed there longer than if I'd had an earn out.
Interesting.
It was purely honor based and duty and responsibility to my customers and my staff. And I ended up working there longer than 2 years.
Did they pay you? Were they paying you like a salary to do?
I paid me just a regular salary, right?
Okay.
So in a way, not only did I stay there longer than if I'd had an earn out, I think I probably was also helped in that there wasn't a moment where you sell and then you just go home and turn the phone off and like I was just kind of, hey, continue. Like we were still,
it wasn't
doing
a
the
light
mission.
switch, right? It wasn't like a night and day situation.
Exactly.
Okay.
So I first had to make sure my employees were taken care of and happy and okay, this piece of software that we do probably fits into the national defense unit of SRA better than the law enforcement unit. So I'm going to go over with them. We'll talk to the manager. We'll make sure, I'll introduce you to the cost, like all that stuff, right? When Providence Equity bought SRA, then the entire management of the company turned over. And so that caused a big swirl of chaos. And I stepped in to almost like, okay, if that layer is chaotic, and there's a time where it's like, there's no CEO in the company, right? Now I'm kind of like, okay, I'm responsible for all of you people now, the SRAers, the platinum people, right? I just want to make sure everything's good. Okay, new CEO comes in. Now I'm going to help him get accurate. And so I did all that. I kind of managed through the swirl and the smoke and the chaos. And then there was like a couple major contracts that I just said, okay, I'm going to help the company get these contracts, which I did. And then I was like, okay. My wife was like, you're working harder than ever. I was like, I know, guys, I'm done. Like I'm riding off in the sunset with these big wins and that's it.
Thank God. I was going to ask you, I mean, credit to you. And I love what you said there, Adam, about being like honor based, and they met you where you wanted to go on your deal, which is great. But you also, you seem like a very, moral, honorable guy based on all the conversation that we've had today, certainly as well, and mission driven, and that you stuck around. I was gonna say, like, your wife must have been, come on, like, let's go on holiday, like we've got all this cash sitting in the bank. So tell us what happens next. And so you obviously, was that a weird day when you finally left the building, so to speak, and left the team? And what happened next? Because presumably then the phone does stop ringing, and we've heard this on the podcast many times, the kind of silence is deafening. And Bo Burlingham, it's a very famous quote, exiting a business is harder than starting one. And when I say exiting, it's exiting in the true sense where you walk out the door. My experience is not being a pure exit. It's been a private equity. So I've been involved in the business as a founder, as a director, but it's evolved over time. So it's been a slower transition. But what you've described there is you had that transition and then all of a sudden, bang. So talk to us. And when was this? This is like 10 years ago or something like that. I'm trying to get.
Yeah, exactly. So if we sold in 2010, it would have been like 2012. Okay. I'm horrible with dates. We might have sold in 2009 and something.
So you say like 12, 13 years ago or something like that. Okay.
Look, I mean, I went through a really serious kind of depression where there was a few moments where I said to my wife, I would give every penny back if we could just undo it, right? Like, I just want to go back, And so it was, I've talked about this every time people in my circle sell a company, I say, we got to have lunch because I'm going to warn you about what's going to
What comes
happen.
next?
And you're not going to believe me at first, but then you're going to know that like, this is real.
That's one of the reasons I do this podcast is what, you talking, because for some people listening, they're going to be like, what? He sold his business for millions. And, I get it. I'm with you. But I think if you can explain like why you felt depressed, right? Why you wanted that company back, like what you went through. And actually, I'd be interested to know how you came out the other side as well, because I'm sure you've been on quite a journey.
Yeah. I mean, so you're right. It's hard to get sympathy, right? People be like, what are you complaining about, right? You won. And well, I mean, you just, there's, for me at least, okay, I'm trying to phrase this diplomatically. If I maybe had like a tax prep software company, I don't know that I would feel like I was really involved in an important mission. I mean, it's important. But was it something that you felt like it was life and death important? Probably not. I felt like a lot of what we were doing was so important. When we would get the bad guy, I would see it on the news and just like, the feeling that you would get out of that was an amazing high. And then to just have it stop is an amazing low, right? I mean, so what am I doing that's important now? Well, how am I helping anyone now? I mean, I can invest in the stocks. I can buy real estate. I can invest in startups and mentor.
It's all boring though. And it's not, it's kind of like not mission driven, I suspect, in the same way.
It's just felt like trading pieces of paper and right. I mean, it didn't feel fulfilling to me. And so that caused like a really dark period for me where and then the other part of it is someone coined the term like every day is Saturday, which sounds great, for the first Saturday. Then by the 15th Saturday in a row, you're kind of like, what should I do? Should I just put the kids to school and then like start drinking a beer now? Like, cause your friends are working, right? I mean, the people you grew up with are like, they've got a 9-to-5 job. You can't call them at 10 a.m. and be like, hey, do you want to go on a hike? Right. It's just like, so your friends we're all working. You're very isolated. I was wondering what I was doing as still a relatively young person. What's next? Like, what should I look forward to? Right. I mean, it's all these things going on that I think contribute to a very lonely period for people that exit, a very kind of confusing period. I made one of the classic mistakes where I said, okay, well, what I need to do is I need to just have another business. Then everything will be okay. And so I made a very poor acquisition where there were major diligence red flags that like seriously, any moron would have looked at this deal and said, oh, this is bad. And I did it anyways. So it's just like, I just need a business, right?
So you bought a business as opposed to
I bought a business that had a related party transaction. So the business was also the customer, and I don't want to get into the details, but it was swimming upstream, beating my head against the wall with a company that half of the business went away because they were buying from themselves, and then the other part of the business failed, and so half of the customer base just disappeared. Right, so you bought kind of an empty bag. It was a poor acquisition. The diligence was there. I could see 50% customer concentration in a related party. Like, I knew not to do this, right? But you just want to kind of do something. Yeah, like do something.
Wow.
So, I had that kind of poor acquisition, then failure, liquidated the company, depressed again, kind of like, what should I be doing here? And I think I just took a more thoughtful approach to saying, okay, if I want to either start another business or buy another business, I want to get into manufacturing. I want to have a company that has a very high revenue to employee. I want to have something that's got a very specialized IP niche. Like, I want to be really, really deliberate and find a company that meets all these profiles. So eventually I did find that company, acquired it. It's a company I own and love running today, Total Shield, that makes ballistic and explosive shielding, mainly for space companies.
Wow. Cool.
Very, very
That's
niche
amazing.
material science kind of company. Greatest customers in the world. It's exciting. It's another mission, right? I mean, now we're SpaceX, Blue Origin, Rocket Lab, Relativity Space, Fast Space, right? I mean, they're amazing engineering companies that are doing amazing, audacious things.
Yeah. That's cool, man. Well, that's amazing. And it's really interesting. I'm just kind of reflecting back on something. You were so specific about this
Yes.
second purchase. And actually, I reflect back on, you were so specific about your exit. Like, sorry, your, not doing an earn out and all this type of stuff. Like, it's this intentionality piece when you've thought about it and you've really been stuck to it has led to a better level of outcome. Whereas it sounds like the first acquisition you did, I'm not saying you ran into it and you kind of just probably weren't as diligent as
I took the first thing that was available, basically.
Yeah, which is actually really counterintuitive to how you come across as a guy. It almost feels like a very rash decision where like people, sell their business, they'll go buy a boat and they're like, I don't actually like being on the water or whatever. Or they'll buy 3 or 4 properties and don't think about managing the property. And I have to ask, so when we started the conversation today, Adam, you talked about, obviously, you and your wife had debt from college, and you don't strike me as you came from wealth and all that kind of stuff. You had to work your way, and you had incredible success. What was your relationship with money like? Obviously, you'd made good money during, I suspect, running a successful business, but obviously, like it was probably a real life-changing amount that appeared after the acquisition. Did it change not your life in terms of buying your house or whatever, like your relationships, you got kids? I think your kids are a bit older than mine, but like how did money change? Because I struggle with this a little bit and thinking of like making sure my kids aren't spoiled, and I want my kids to understand the value of cash and hard work and all this type of stuff, but they go to a really good school and it's like not always surrounded by the best people. So I'm just, you strike me as someone that probably would have thought about this and faced some uncomfortable stuff.
Yeah. I mean, what I'm very thankful for is the fact that my wife and I had a very similar kind of upbringing and the same view of money. And I think a lot of relationships are really stressed.
Absolutely.
When money enters the picture, either when there's not enough money or when there's sudden an abundance of money and one partner wants to spend like crazy and the other one is conservative, right? I mean, so I'm super lucky that my wife and I were exactly aligned, still are to this day. Not extravagant spenders, much more focused on experience and stuff. My wife doesn't own like designers, clothing.
Similar.
Right? She's just not interested in that stuff, which I'm very fortunate and lucky.
Because it would do your head in, right? It would drive you crazy. I always have this conversation with my wife. She's like, "You're lucky." She's still say, "You're lucky I'm not one of these wives that goes out and buys a 50 grand Hermes bag." And I'm like, God, thank God for that.
Yes. I mean, it's because I think when I started working at 13, I think I was getting paid like $2 or $2.25 an hour to pick up hay bales, throw them onto a truck, right? Working farm work.
Yeah.
And I would just, if there's a $50,000 handbag, I'll think, okay, how many years would I've had to work to afford that, right? I mean, so I think the thing about money is not having enough causes a lot of stress. There's no doubt about that, right? I mean, I grew up in a household. My father owned a construction company where if he got an extra $50, he'd buy a new wheel for a backhoe or something, right? And my mom would be like, "Hey, but the kids don't have any shoes," and he'd be like, they can get the hand-me-downs from like the church, right? And so we wore like everything about our lives were kind of like, oh, great, here's some hand-me-downs, right? Here, I'm just, and I kind of grew up in that environment where I wasn't happy about it, but it's kind of like, well, you sacrifice for the business, like that's what we do. And so my wife and I kind of fell into that trap too, where we had zero personal savings. We lived way below our, and so we would, if the company made money, we would just keep it within the company accounts and invest it. And so, to have a bunch of money at first, it was kind of like unbelievable, right? I mean, when we first, the point where I thought we are actually legitimately wealthy, and I tell this story all the time, it's so goofy, but it's what sticks with me, is we used to go to Whole Foods. It was called Fresh Fields at the time. I got Whole Foods.
Yeah.
And we would just kind of like window shop. We'd be like, wow, look at that steak. Like, that looks awesome. And then we go somewhere else and, buy like the budget food. And we went into the Whole Foods and we just like bought like, the steak and the beer and we went and just rang it up and paid for it. And I was just like, we could do this as much as we want now.
And
Like,
yeah. Wow.
so just being able to shop at like the high-end grocery store was something I never really even dreamed about when I was a younger person.
Yeah. That's
And
cool. Sorry, go.
Yeah. I mean, I think when people say like money doesn't buy happiness, it absolutely doesn't. I think, what it does do though, is if you think back to like, oh crap, my wife's car has a flat tire and I can't fix it. I don't have enough money to fix that. Right. I mean, the lack of money causes so much stress. Having money,
Absolutely.
when it removes that stress, that is a major life improvement. And
I agree.
But I agree with everyone that says incrementally more money doesn't really change your life after that point.
No, it's a great point. And actually, you then have to do something with the money, right? Is also you have to manage the money and think about what it means to your kids and stuff like that. And like you said earlier, like no one's playing any little tiny violins for people in your position or our position in terms of doing this, but it's a reality that people need to understand before they go through a transaction, because there's always a bit of a honeymoon period where you buy the nice car or the nice house or whatever. But you very eloquently describe what many call like the messy middle, right? Which is like, it can be very lonely, it can be very depressing, like what to do next. You lose all your identity, and then I think, certainly my observation is you've then come out the other side, you've explored and reinvented yourself in a way, but you haven't changed. I mean, certainly I don't know you that well, Adam, but you certainly don't strike me as like you've changed fundamentally as a person. If anything, you've found your new mission, which drives you on a daily basis. You're excited by it. And, in addition to having that financial security, which is amazing. And so, yeah, I mean, well, look, I know we're over time already, but this has been like an amazing kind of conversation. So much wisdom you've shared with both, aspiring entrepreneurs that are growing their business, but also post-exit ones like myself. And I've been furiously making notes. Have you been speaking? I have one final question, I suppose, about your kids. I'm just interested, like, as someone who's got young kids and I do think a lot about, wanting my kids to have, similar to yourself, like a resourcefulness, a groundedness, a grit to work hard, but also I want to give them the best education. I want to give, like, I don't want them to have the hand-me-downs like if my kids want. How do you, your kids are older, I think, maybe in their 20s now or late teens. How do you think about that? Because I think you're obviously very thoughtful, intentional, and grounded. And so I think you've probably given some thought to this as well.
Yeah, and I've also had the benefit of interacting with other families that are either people that inherited money, right? So they're kind of generational wealth, but mainly they're folks like me who were first-time entrepreneurs who were kind of the first in their family to actually have some money. So I've observed kind of kids in these families. And one of the things that I would say to you is that's optimistic is a lot of these kids are amazing kids, right? I mean, they're not spoiled. They're not entitled,
Yeah.
And so the reason what I think happens is this: kids never listen to what you say, but they watch everything that you do. And if you're modeling discipline in your life, my kids see my wife and I get up every morning early and go to the gym and eat right and do all these things. And they see that, and then they start modeling that behavior. And so, we travel and we have amazing vacations. But we're always trying to expose them to situations where maybe they're out of their comfort zone, or, hey, we're going to take part in this philanthropic effort to build a house in Tijuana, and you're going to live with the folks that are in a shack in Tijuana, and just exposing them to the world, modeling the behavior that you want to see in them. And I think kids can grow up in any environment, either
Yeah.
an environment with the parents that have resources or parents that are resource constrained. So long as I think you're modeling what you want to see in them, they eventually pick it up. Like my wife will always say, like, oh, they sound like you. Like they're saying the same things you say all the time, right?
Yeah.
And they say the same thing she says all the time. But it's just they pick it up. And so I think there's optimism, and I'm not so worried as I was about like, oh, geez, if kids grow up with money, are they immediately going to be spoiled? It hasn't happened.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, actually. I appreciate, because I'm a big believer in kind of like they do as you do, and they'll pick up your bad habits as well as your good habits, being very intentional, very similar, going to the gym, working hard, doing stuff I'm passionate about, being kind to people, being
Correct.
generous. Like, in a bit, we're big on vacations and experiences. Like, we don't have fancy cars or any of that kind of stuff. We could, but I just don't see the value necessarily for it. So, well, look, Adam, honestly, this has been amazing. You are a great example to aspiring entrepreneurs and post-exit entrepreneurs, and you seem like a great guy as well. So thank you for being a great guest on NexChapter podcast.
Raman, thanks for having me.